Hi, I'm Ashley. Today I'm continuing my birth month animal series in watercolor, and this month is June, which is the horse. So I did this animal in 3 different styles, starting with a traditional version, then going to a more whimsical version surrounded by flowers, and then a baby cartoony version. And I did that to appeal to a lot of different people's tastes and styles. So these are perfect cards for anybody born in the month of June or anybody who just loves horses. And you can create whichever one appeals to you or you think will appeal to the person you are making it for the most. So on these videos, I have all 3 versions of the card here in this video, and they are sped up because each one took about an hour. And so that would just be way too long of a video for YouTube. But I didn't cut out any of the content. So it's all just sped up, but it's all there. So you can see exactly what I'm doing to create the cards from start to finish. Also, I kept my real-time instructions in the video. So I didn't cut out my instructions either. I just kind of sped up around it so that you hear kind of my thought process and what I'm doing for each step. Now, if you don't feel like having a go at one of these yourself, the cards are available as prints on my website, which is shop.craftywithashley.com. But I hope that you give at least one of them a shot. These were really fun to create. So let's go ahead and dive into the tutorials. So to start on the traditional horse, I'm just going to start with the basic shapes, making sure that it's going to fit on the page where I want it. So very lightly, just going to sketch out kind of where I want the chest to be. And this horse is going to be kind of jumping up. And I don't know what it's called, pawing at the air, I guess. So I just got to make sure that the legs are all going to fit within my frame here. And I'll refine these shapes more later. I mean, right now it's pretty boxy. I'm just getting an idea of where they're going to be placed, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect right now, but that's also why I'm drawing very lightly so that it can be edited later. Okay, gonna tuck in this kind of back front leg, curves around here, and pokes out below just a little bit. Okay, for the face, I'm gonna get general idea of the nose in there because I want to get that distance between the head and the arms correct, and then we can pull it out from there. Okay, so now I'm just kind of getting in where I want those final marks to be and really kind of solidifying the drawing at this stage. Here's where the mouth is going to be, so I'm just getting in that indication there. Jaw, neck, chest. Smoothing out some of these angles and making them more subtle curves. Getting in some of the details here around the ankles. If they're called ankles on horses, I don't know. Then again, smoothing out some of these lines. Okay, and then for the tail, I'm just going to indicate where it kind of comes out and the very general shape of it. And I'm going to do this pretty lightly because I want to be able to erase most of that. And it's going to go all the way down to the ground, but I don't have to worry about that because I'm going to do that with just paint. Okay, so in general though, there is the shape of the tail. And then same with the mane. Don't really have to do anything for the mane because I'll just do that with paint. Okay, so now I'm going to lighten up that drawing. I guess I didn't work on these front legs much, so let me kind of work on those a little bit more too. So there's just some subtle curves in the front legs here. The elbow joint here is pretty pointy, so I'm going to get that in pretty strong there. Okay, and then the second one comes down into that first arm basically. We come up, and then we have like a subtle curve, flat spot, curve, point up, and then it angles down in. And then we have a hoof here that's just peeking out. Now I've lightened it up. Okay, I'm gonna mix up a nice, like, golden brown. So I'm gonna start with some burnt sienna, which is a very, like, orangey warm brown. And I'm mixing it in this well that had some just general darks in it. So it probably had some ultramarine, burnt umber, sepia, just Payne's gray, just darks. So it's going to get a little bit dulled down by that. So that's a good color to start with. And then I'm just getting some water and I'm going to paint that over my horse here. And there are a couple areas that I'm going to leave white for some light space, some white space. So on the around the mouth, around the hooves will be white. And I just want to make sure this stays wet, so I'm adding more water to it. I'm just trying to prevent any hard edges in this first wash by ensuring that the areas where I stop have a little bead of color on them, or a little bead of water. So if, like there, if I leave that bead of water up there, then I can come back to it after and it won't be dry yet. But I don't want a puddle of water anywhere else, because then it will dry funny with like cauliflower edges, because it'll be drying at different rates. Okay, so then any excess little puddles I'm going to pick up with my brush and dab it away. Okay, now I'm going to take some clean water and determine where I want some like lost edges, and just kind of blend some of those areas out a little bit. So I'm just letting some of these areas touch and bleed just to get the illusion of some movement, basically. Okay, and then I'm going to get a little bit more of my burnt sienna with a little burnt umber to make it darker. And then this is a thicker mixture, and I'm going to tap that in to make the tail here. And maybe clean up those edges a little bit, because that got a lot more wild than I wanted it to. So I'm just going to take a very minimally damp brush and push some of that back into that tail. Okay. Now I'm just taking a dry, mostly dry brush and pulling some of that pigment that I put into the tail this direction, so that it looks like there's maybe like a breeze blowing it. Just add a tiny bit more to create a little bit of textured marks here as it's slowly drying. Okay. Now I can again add some clean water just to create some like intentional cauliflowering. It can sometimes look kind of cool for this style. Okay. Now I'm going to get in some of the mane, and so I'm going to add a little bit of water here along the mane, and this is going to be flowing back as well, just kind of flowing around just a little bit, coming, peeking through where the ears are. Of course, I put my arm down here and lifted some of this away with my sweater. Whoops. So just add a little bit more in And I'm not worried about this right here because I'm going to go in and add more darkness to the horse anyway. So it's fine that that has a funky edge right there. I'm going to add just a little bit more darkness to the base of the mane here. Pull some of that out. Now I'm going to let that dry and then start working on the layering in the body. So taking a little bit more of that burnt sienna, and I'm going to start adding depth to the horse here. So I'm going to add this area under the neck and chest. Okay, then I'm going to dry off the brush and blend that out. Same thing kind of under the arm here. Okay, define that shape a little bit better on the chest. Under here. Okay, so I switched to a smaller brush to have a little bit better water control, because I just felt like it was getting away from me a little bit today. And so just adapt. I can figure that out about myself today and adapt by changing to a smaller brush. Now for this back leg, it's in shadow, so it's a bit darker and a bit cooler as well. So I'm just adding a little bit of sepia to it because that's a little bit of a cooler brown. It's also very dark. Okay, and then I'm just going to do a light wash of that color over the hoof here. And then switch back to my brighter color and work on this front leg. Okay, and then that darker color again for shadow. Then this leg here, a nice golden color, and then some shadows. Just gonna add in some shadows for like the rippling muscles in the arms here. So here I'm just continuing to build up these shadows and just kind of keeping some harsh edges to maintain some interest. Okay, now I'm going to take some clean water and add it to the page, and then take some of my browns and splatter them in. Okay, now I'm going to come up and work on the face, so I need to add some shadows, obviously, to here, the bottom part, maintain that here, okay, and blend it out. Define the shape a little bit more here. Add a little bit more of my burnt sienna. And then I'm just going to take a very pale wash of my same like browns here to get the white part, like the shadow in the white part here. Okay. Pull the shadow down from the ear. This is wet, so it's gonna bleed some. As long as it doesn't bleed too much where it takes over, that's okay with me. Okay, set a little shadow here for the base. Just a little bit more darkness in for the mane. Now I need to go back to these front legs and add in the hoof color. So just the same as I did on the nose, I'm just going to take a very subtle wash of my light brown and kind of edge around it. Then I can take a little bit of darker color and touch the edge a little bit more. And this one in the back's more in shadow, so I can just add a little bit more, no big deal. Okay, and then down here, this hoof is in this puddle of water. I'm just gonna lift up that puddle so that I can work on it. And then I'm gonna pull out some shadows from the horse here. Maybe make it a little bit more gray, or a lot more gray. Now I'm going to go ahead and dry up here so that I can add the eye and the nostril. So a nice dark mixture here of Payne's Gray and Sepia. Okay, the eye can be around here, and then the nostril is going to be here. And it's basically just like a little half circle almost. Okay. I'm going to just kind of add a little bit of a hint of a shadow for where the mouth is. Now a little bit more color onto the eye. So the eye is basically like a circle with a little swoop at the end. Just a tiny swoop. Touch more into the darkest part on the nostril. So I'm basically just tapping here. I'm just going to add tiny bit of that color for a shadow in some spots, just, I don't know, because I feel like it. Here, yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit more shading on the face because it looks just way too smooth given how textured the rest of the horse is. It needs to kind of match a little bit better. Okay, we'll give it a little bit of darkness around the eye here. Okay. Now I'm going to dry it. Okay, and then I'm going to take my white pastel pencil and add a little bit of highlight to some of the dark areas. Okay, just some marks here and there. Okay, and then you can kind of blend them out a little bit when they're too harsh with your finger, the towel. Okay, I like the color variations here, but this leg is a little bit too much, so I'm just going to take a wash of my burnt sienna with a tiny bit of burnt umber, not very much, paint on my brush, just a little bit, and I'm just going to go over that leg to blend it out a little bit, and then just touch of that same color into the lighter areas of the body so that it matches. Okay, so now that's a little bit less like harsh colors, so I like that better. Now I'm going to take my kind of stiffer brush here and add in some more small splatters just to get a little bit more texture. For the second horse, again, just going to start with the basic shapes, make sure that it's going to fit on the page how I like. We'll start with getting the general head shape in here, and I can refine it later, so it's not a big deal if it looks funky right now. So just a little swoop for the like jaw area, and then a elongated like half circle, and then almost just a straight line up to the top of the head, and then the head's gonna curve around down to the neck, and then the neck's going to be almost vertical here. I'm going to throw the ears on just basic triangle shapes because it looks really funny without them. Still looks funny, but it'll come together as we start to refine these shapes, okay? So here is like where the body starts. So we have like a shoulder bulging out, and we're coming down into the leg. And then for this side, we are gonna have the body. So it's kind of turning its head this way, right? So its body's kind of going back into the distance. So it's gonna look weird until we get some shading in, basically. Okay. So here's the back side, and it comes down into the back leg here. Here's the belly, side out, far down. I want the belly to go. And then it's kind of twisted through here, and the other leg is kind of up. So it's going to be coming down this way, like it's in the middle of a step, looking down to like a knee here, basically. So there's the general idea of that one. This leg comes off here, and it comes down straight-ish, and then the back leg is also bent, so it's kind of coming off that way. And it's like a little triangle, and then it angles back this way where the hoof is. Okay? This kind of curves around here and then curves to like this narrow area. Okay, something like that. Okay, so there's the general shape of the horse, and then its tail is going to come out this way. So I have to decide if I like the placement on the card, which it's a little bit off to the left, but that's okay. I can always crop it later if I need to. Okay, so now for getting in the features a little bit more defined here. So we have like the lower lip part of the horse, and then the mouth and the nose. It kind of curves around. Okay, so I'm doing like a curve here and then a line up toward the top of the nose, and then it's going to be kind of curved around. So slight curve, and then we're going to get the nostrils in, because it'll make it make more sense, right? It'll look better with getting some of those features in. So that nostril's there, and then this nostril kind of sticks out over this little area here that we dipped in. That's why we did that, so that then we can have this nostril kind of sticking out like a little triangle. Yeah, and then the ear we're going to refine that now. So it comes down into the side of the head, not right off the top. And it's going to kind of have a curve back here and then kind of curve up to a point. And then this side also has like a slight curve. Okay? And then you're kind of seeing the side of the ear. So we have to do that. And then this is like where the opening is, right? So do that. Okay. And then for the other ear, we're actually going to have the mane coming down in front. The second ear is going to come and have like a bump, and then a little curve, and then a curve down this way. And then the back of the head isn't quite that shape, so I'm going to erase that. Come down out a little bit, and then down a little bit sharper, and then curve it around, and lock in the rest of the mane. Just getting the basic shape of the mane. Okay, now for the neck, it kind of comes out here and then comes in toward the chest. So that's going to help me for some shading later. And that's the same with this line here. It's kind of coming down into the chest. Now on the back of the horse, I kind of just went all the way up, but we're actually going to see a little bit of its back just to make it not look so chubby, basically. But it's coming down, not like that. And then right where the bottom of that curve is where the side of the horse, like that side of the shoulder is. Now just refining the leg. So we have that like shoulder area, and then we have muscly part of the leg that then comes in and tapers off. Okay. On this side, I want to make sure that I get the thickness right. So I'm going to start there and then add this part that comes out toward the body. And then again, this like knee area or whatever it's called. This was a little too pointed. So down from the shoulder area. We're going to come in a little bit, then add that part. It ankles in. A little bit of like a knee bulge there. This is going to be covered down here by like florals and green walking through fields, so I'm not worried about the hooves really at this point. Now for the belly, reinforce that a little bit. So at this point, I'm just, again, going over those lines, making sure that I'm happy with the location of them all before I do it a little bit, draw it a little bit harder. So on this leg, I'm just going to add a little bit of shape here, or like, again, where that knee joint would be. It's kind of like a ball widening there. But this leg's pretty straight down, and it widens out. It's up the back. Something like that. Okay, again, hooves, not really worried about. Okay, now the eye placement is important. So we're going to come in and use the ear as the reference here for where the eye will be placed. So it's going to be just like down from the ear, and it's kind of in line with this point of the ear. So very lightly first, a little swoop, like half circle for the bottom part of the eye, and then the top is going to have a little U, very shallow U shape for the eyelid, and then it comes up and it's like a sideways S curve, so like a little wave, and then you can see the eyelid on the top, and then the eye will be in like that. Okay, and there is the sketch. So now we can just use that as our guide for painting it. Now I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm going to roll it over the page to get rid of any of the extra graphite. Okay, so now to paint the horse, I'm going to take some burnt sienna to start with, just to get a nice warm brown color. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of these darker browns in just to tone it down a tad. It's nice and watery, and I'm just going to put a wash over the whole horse, but I'm going to leave some areas that I want to be white or highlighted so that I preserve the white of the page in those areas. So mainly that's around the eye, and the nose is going to be white as well. And then a little bit on the back is going to be highlighted as well. So I'm just going to leave that white. And then down at the bottom, I'm just going to add some water and wash it out, because again, that's going to have grasses and plants and stuff. So I don't have to worry about those. And I just want it to be nice and blended out. Blend that wash up so that there's not a harsh line. Now, lift just a little bit here where the wash got into this white space that I want to preserve there. And then add a little bit right along the edge of water just to kind of push that line back a little bit, blend it out some. So it was a hard line. Now you see that it's just a subtle transition from the brown to the white. So now I'm going to let that dry and then move on to the next layer. Okay, I'm going to add some clean water to the tail area here and everything off to this side of it basically. But I'm not letting that water go over where the leg is. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the mane. Okay, now I'm going to let that soak in for just a minute so that it isn't too wet. And I'm going to take some darker brown here. And I don't want it to be super watery. I want it to be loose enough that it moves in that water, but not so wet that it just explodes and takes over. So I'm actually going to dry my brush out a little bit, and then I'm going to take some of this mixture on my brush, and I'm not taking as much, okay? And then I'm going to start at the ends and drag my brush up, because wherever I lift, it's going to create a little explosion like that, and I don't want that toward the ends. On the mane though, I am kind of letting it feather out a bit more on the edges. Okay, right there, the page isn't wet, so you can see how defined that mark is compared to these feathery ones. Right? Okay, take some thicker, darker mixture and tap that along the edge to get an even darker version. and then throw some of that color in. Okay, some of these areas, like here, they got out of control. So I'm gonna take my towel and just kind of lift it up, clean out my brush really good, dry it off a little bit, blend some of that away, and just lift it out again. Okay, and then I'm gonna add some clean water in just to get a little bit more texture here. Okay, kind of splatter. Then we're just gonna lift along this edge a little bit because I'm not super happy with that. So if you do things while it's wet, you can kind of modify stuff if you're not happy with how it looks. So just keep that in mind. If you're working kind of quickly, you can kind of modify a little bit. Okay, now I'm gonna let that dry and start working on some of the shading on the horse. Okay, so I'm gonna stick with this large brush for right now. Get some slightly darker mixture here than our initial wash. And then we're just gonna start adding some shading. So look for the spots where it's gonna be the darkest and add just a slight line of color and then blend it out a little bit. And this one's gonna kind of blend up into the neck where there's a shadow because of the muscles in the neck there. And connecting those shadows will help make it look like a little bit more seamless. Okay, so then same idea here under the jaw. And then you can blend that down toward these shadows here. And then this leg in the back is going to be more in shadow than the leg in the front. And so I'm going to get that in, add in a little bit of darker brown, and then a small amount of blue to make it a more shadowy color, pink brown. So my darkest shadows are going to have the blue in them. And I'm just kind of tapping that color into the damp or the wet paint really. For the curved areas, to make it look more three-dimensional, if you add just a little bit of shadow toward the edge, it'll curve it around. A bit more of my blue, and I'm going to do this back leg, and I'm just gradually making it warmer as I'm coming away from that darkest part. Here. And then same with this leg where it comes out from like behind the belly area. It's going to be a little bit more blue, and then it's going to warm up as it comes away from me. And just going to add some clean water to the bottom here to push some of that pigment back up. For the back side here, it's going to be a little bit darker because it is a little bit shadowed compared to the belly, but it's like warm also because the sun's coming off the top of the horse. So we're going to blend that kind of around. And again, now I'm creating that curve on the belly with adding that shadow and blending it up into the horse, up into the rest of the horse. Add just a little bit of blue along the edge, so this can kind of be a little bit of a lost edge between the leg here and the belly. And then slight shadows coming down from the neck here where he's turned. So I'm going to separate my bristles a little bit and let that be kind of a random marks there. You know, for some of the shadows coming up into the head, define some of the sharper features here of the horse. So we have a little shadow here, shadow along the bottom. Okay, and just gradually building up here. And I know it looks like really splotchy and kind of funny right now, but it'll come together as we keep building. Okay, I'm going to take just a little bit of like a grayish mixture here. on the end where the white nose is to give it just a little bit of shadow as well. You put that up into the other shadows here. Chance? The ears are gonna have like a bluish center to make it darker. Okay. Now we're gonna make sure this is nice and dry before we do the next layer. Okay, so this next layer, we're just gonna now take a wash of brown. Okay, so I'm mixing my burnt sienna and my burnt umber to make it not too orangey and then loosening it up. Okay, so this is very similar to that first wash that we did, and we're just gonna go over the horse again. Very lightly, not using a lot of brush strokes. So I'm still using a nice big brush, going around the whites. Okay, and then I can add a little bit more darks wet on wet where it needs still some more shadow. And we can, if we just brush a little bit harder with that wash, we can blend out some of that first layer of shadow. Because even though it's dry, it can be reactivated, right? And so that can prevent it from looking too streaky while still getting the contrast. Just added a dark line there that now I'm going to blend out toward the shoulder to define those two areas. So yeah, anywhere that I'm seeing I want a harder line, but not a completely hard line, right? Because it's still wet. It's not, this layer that I just washed in is not dry. So it's gonna bleed out some, but I'm using a thicker version of paint, and this is damp instead of wet. Now I'm gonna come back in and work on the hair a little bit more, or the mane, I mean. So I'm gonna use a pressure stroke here. So I'm doing heavier pressure and then lighter pressure just to get thicker to thinner lines, and a little bit of dry brushing as well. So I'm letting that run out on my brush. My bristles are kind of separating, so it's adding even extra texture. So just a very light touch though. Same with the mane here. Just gonna add some very subtle texture there just to make it look like it's flying off. And then I want to kind of add back in what I consider the bangs. Now I'm gonna clean out my brush, take a lighter wash here. Not much water though, right? My bristles are very dry, very separated, and I'm just gonna add some dry brushing over the chest just to increase the texture a little bit. Just a very small amount on the back. Then darken up the bottom part of the mouth here and blend it out just a tad. Now I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. So that was a size 16 round. This is a size 8 round. And I'm going to add just a touch more shadow on the nose. So this is just gray, whatever's mixed up in my palette here. So around the nostril, which obviously I'll add in a minute. Okay. And then right along the mouth. And then I just want to add a little bit more darkness here to the shoulder area, to this area to define that highlight a little bit more. Now I need to add in the eye, so I'm just going to mix some burnt umber and some ultramarine blue to get a nice dark gray blackish color. Add a little bit of sepia in. Now I'm just going to kind of outline the eye there, and I'm using just the very tip of my brush, and then I'm going to tap in that color and leave some white space, and then I'm going to pull that color out toward the corners, following those curves that I had originally drawn. Make it just a tiny bit bigger, which is always risky to do from the to alter from the sketch. I don't know why I do that with the eyes, but I wanted it bigger. Okay. And then with the nostrils, it's the same color. It's gonna feel really dark at first, but I promise that that's necessary. Okay, and kind of do a C shape there. And then for the other side, just a little boop. Now I'm gonna clean out my brush, dry it off mostly, very minimal water, and then we're gonna blend that out just slightly. Same color, not much water, to define that shadow under the lip where the mouth is. And since that's going over the brown of the bottom lip, it makes it look a little bit warmer. Now I'm gonna take a step back and just make sure I'm happy with it. And then I'm gonna add in my green and foliage. So I'm gonna dry it, make sure it's nice and dry before I start that. Okay, so for this, I'm gonna add some clean water first and just kind of go around the horse, up above a little bit. I'm just gonna go all the way to the top, just because then I won't get any like harsh lines where I might not want them. Going just over where these hooves are. And then I'm just gonna take some of this green, some olive green, a little bit of Prussian blue to cool it down for the background. And I'm just gonna kind of splatter in some greens in the background. Tap, splatter. I don't want to splatter on the nose, so I'm gonna tap it around the nose. And this is just gonna make it look like there's some green foliage stuff in the background. Get a little bit warmer on the right side because that's the direction that the sun's coming from. Add a little bit more of the olive on that side, but it doesn't really matter that much. Okay, and then I'm just washing that down into the foreground. I'm just gonna add some cleanish water and tilt to get some backgrounds. Now I just want to add a little bit of that green, so very minimal water and paint on my brush. And I'm just going to put it back in between the horse and the background in this little area. And adding some splashes of water will create some more textures there. Okay, right there I dropped some water on the horse and I don't want that, so I'm just lightly going to pick that up. Now I need to let that dry and then I'll work on the actual foreground. Okay, so I just dried it a tiny bit with the heat tool and then I'm gonna take some more water now that it's more like damp, right? Because I dried it partially. And I'm just gonna tap in some more water here. Try it again. And then one more time with it being even more dry. Just adding a little bit more of the bluish green around the mane. I've added a little bit of water into the mane too, so that it would blend toward those edges. Okay, now just letting that dry for realistic. For the foliage, I'm gonna do like a orangey red-ish mix. So this is, I think, maybe cadmium scarlet and perline maroon that I'm mixing here. I can't remember what this color is. I think it's cadmium scarlet though. So it's basically orange. And this kind of dark maroony red, but it's on the warmer side still, so more orangey. And then I'm gonna loosen that up, and that's the color I'm gonna use to make my flowers. And I'm gonna start by splattering some in. And this is dry, so that's gonna stay where it splatters. It's not gonna bleed out at all. But then I'm gonna take some of those and add some little dots to it to make them spread out a little bit. Okay, but that gives me nice like random placement of some of these initial flowers. And then some of these are just gonna kind of blend into each other and others are gonna be more kind of standalone. With this kind of area right under the horse and in front of is where I want them to be the most concentrated. Then I'm going to take a little bit more splatter into this side area. Okay, now for the green, I'm going to use some Hooker's green here, which is pretty bright, and splatter some of that in as well. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of clean water to blend some of that out. And it's going to make it kind of brown because I'm mixing red and green here. That's okay. I'm not worried about it, because I'm going to add darker layers next. So now I'm going to start at the top and kind of drag some of that color down, letting it kind of explode at the bottom here. Tap some in kind of around the hooves, under the tail, and then tap some in to various areas near the pink or orangey, I guess it's like peach colored. Tap some more of that in. And these are going to be roses because rose is the birth month flower for June. Now, this poor little horse is walking through a rose field. I don't know how horse people are going to feel about that, but, you know, just the aesthetic, I guess. Sorry for anybody who wishes the horse wasn't walking through roses. But you can pretend they're different flowers if it bothers you. Over here, I'm just literally dropping in like globs of water because I want that side to be kind of washed out. Now we need to let that dry before I do the next layer of those more like defined flowers. Okay, so same size 8 round brush, same color mixed up here. And I'm just gonna add some shadows basically to some of these flowers that I already painted so that it looks like there are some petals. So basically just like little C-shaped shadows, and they're kind of growing in a cluster. Some are pointed more toward us, some are pointed more away, and some can be more open and full, and some can be more closed. I'll add some more greenery also to some of these. So you can see I'm just like tapping. I'm not doing anything super crazy, pretty simple technique here just to get the impression of these flowers. And I'm just thinking about painting, leaving lots of the light area. Like this is just the shadow between the petals. We're gonna add another layer to some of these. And then for some in the background, I'm just literally taking my brush and tapping just to get some texture. It's more just dry brushing, just for some texture in some of those areas. Now for the green, I'm just gonna take the tip of my brush and add some stems here. And just like little lines. And then I can take some dry brushing up from the bottom, just add some texture and a little bit more darkness. Now to add some leaves. So again, I'm not gonna go crazy here. I'm not gonna add a bunch of them, but just enough to make them like bushy looking instead of individual like shoots of flowers, like maybe a bulb or something, right? Because roses grow on a bush, not individually. So I'm just gonna take the tip of my brush and dot in for some leaves. Rose bushes have up toward the top, the leaves are like 3 to a stem, and then they're kind of like jaggedy, and toward as you get farther away from the flower, they are 5 leaves to a stem. So if you care and want to do that, you can make it look a little bit more rosy by adding the right number of leaves. You see how that kind of fills it up and makes it look more bushy instead of like individual flowers. Okay, now I'm going to take a little bit of that darker color, splatter, a little bit of water, splatter onto those other splatters just to make them loosen up a tad. And that's it. I'm going to dry it and I'm going to sign it. And I grade color. Okay, for our third horse, the baby horse, again, gonna start with the basic shapes. So I'm start by putting in the back side here, kind of boxy. I'll smooth it out though as we go. And then have the belly, and this is gonna be the miniature horse baby. So they're so cute. I don't know if any of you have ever seen miniature horses in real life. About 30 minutes from where I grew up, I would drive past this farm and they had miniature horses. And in the spring, when they had their foals, they were just the most adorable thing on the planet, the little tiny ones. And I remember specifically one time we drove by, and we stopped to look for the little babies, and they were laying down in the field, but the farmer, the person who owned it, was out, and he went and had them stand up so that we could see it. Oh my gosh, it was just the cutest thing ever. Again, I'm using the side of my pencil here really lightly, so that I can erase and refine the shapes later. Okay, chest area, and then we'll have the head, jaw, down to the mouth. And then here's like nose, and then up to the top of the head. Adorable little ears here. Kind of exaggerate the size of the ears. I am aware that the ears are really not this big, but that's okay. And then he's going to have his blowing mane here, and the other ear is going to come up. And the mane's just going to kind of go crazy, but basically it's going to be somewhere along that shape. Okay. Let's get face in a little bit better here. Okay. The neck's going to come down here toward the shoulder. And the hair is coming all the way off the neck. Great. And then kind of get back side here. So I'm going to do like a little bit of a dip and then back up, and that's like the booty of the horse, and then this is the back, and again the belly's here, and then let's get this back leg in. This back leg really shouldn't be longer than the front leg because it's farther away, so that looked funny. Let's try again and exaggerate the belly just a little bit, and then I'm going to pull this leg in more to shorten the horse some. Ready? And then try that leg again. And I might need to lengthen this front leg a little bit so that I don't run out of room. Yeah, I'm going to have to do that. So let's lengthen out this leg a little bit. Okay. That's better. And then we'll redo this side a little bit. And then the back leg, the other back leg is going to come down. Maybe out of here, kind of be back behind, like so. Now, I'm just going to define some of these lines a little bit more. So now for the head, and get this neck in a little bit more defined. Okay, and then we're going to have the little jawline here coming up toward the mouth, and then the mouth is going to be here. And nose kind of like this, nostril here and here, coming up to the eyes. Okay, so we're going to have one eye come off this side, and then the other eye is going to be on this side of the head, like for the ear. So again, using those ears as my landmark, I'm going to come down from the outside point of the ear and do a curve for the bottom. So actually I'm going to do the top first. So I'm going to exaggerate the size of this eyes just to make it a little bit more like cartoony, but I want to get the shape similar. Okay, so it's going to be the wider eye here than what you would see in real life, and a little bit longer. And until we add the pupil and color and stuff, it looks creepy. That's what I've learned. Just roll with it because it will look better. So if I add in a little bit of darkness for like a pupil, it makes it look less creepy pretty much instantly. It's still a little creepy, but it'll look better. I promise. Now I'm gonna clean it up, erase any extra graphite area in the back. I just want to refine that shape a little bit more. Lift up some of that extra again. Okay. And now I can paint it. So we're going to start with that orangey base layer of the burnt sienna, cooled down just a little bit with some of the other browns that are in this mixing well. And I'm going to wash that over the whole miniature horse, leaving some areas white around the face for those details. So the nose, I'm just making the nose on all of these horses white. Okay, so again, wash and dry with my brush, and around the white space, I'm going to push some of that paint back a little bit to make it a seamless blend in between those light white areas and the wash. Okay, now to let that wash dry, and then we'll add some shadows. So I'm going to take another wash of the darker brown and start adding my shadows. So just get that color in and then dry off my brush, and I can drag that up and out and drag some of that color down. Touch of blue to the darkest areas. So just kind of getting some of these lines in to define some of these areas. So like coming down the chest, we have a little bit of a shadow there. Here, where the arm is bending, we have a shadow. Here between, we have a darker shadow coming down into that warmer shadow color onto the leg. And then over here, we have just a little bit of a shadow separating that like bottom area, that buttocks area in the back here. This back leg is in shadow. A little bit of a shadow under the neck, and then the eyelid area down kind of into the cheek, around the ear. Now I'm going to let that layer dry and then work on the next layer. I'm going to go for a smaller brush. So I was using a 16 round. Now I'm going to switch to a 10. That one felt just a little bit too big for some of this. I'm going to take a warmer wash now and go over the whole thing. So this is very similar to that first wash that I did. I'm going to leave a little bit unpainted for some highlights though. Okay, take a darker brown and add in another layer of some shadow. Cool it down with some blue. Okay, negative painting around this back leg to define where the two legs separate. Wash out my brush and blend out this shadow just a little bit. Add just a little bit more, a little bit darker shadow here. Now I'm gonna let that dry. And I'm gonna add the hooves. So that's gonna be a darker, cooler color. So sepia with ultramarine. Okay, adding a little bit more blue to the darker shadowed side. Okay. Now to add some texture and make it look like hairy, right? Because this is a baby fluffy little miniature horse. So I'm gonna separate the bristles of my brush, dry it out, get just a small amount of paint and dry brush to get like a hairy texture. Now let's work on the mane. So I'm gonna take some clean water, cleanish water, we'll put it all around the mane here. See, touching the edge, and it's going pretty far out from the horse itself so that there's not a hard edge. Okay, and then I'm gonna take some of my brown, tap it in. Okay, now that this is sort of drying funny, I'm gonna edit it just a little bit. So I took a smaller brush and I'm taking just a small amount of that dark paint, pretty thick, and getting in that color along the edge, but pulling it out a little bit because there was like a super like outlined look that I didn't like. So I'm editing it just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm just adding in some like lowlights into the mane. Now that I kind of cleaned up what I want to clean up, I'm just trying to keep some movement into the hair. Okay, that's better. I'm gonna do the nose and the eyes. So I have to decide which color I want to make the eyes. So I'm gonna think about that in a minute and do the nose first. So ultramarine, burnt umber, get a nice dark. Okay, tap that in, and then same on the other side, just kind of tap it in there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow in the middle, kind of coming down. Now for the bottom part of the house, add my brown color for that I used for the body, and add a bit of a bottom jaw there. Make it look a little bit hairy. Adding it in along the edge, dry brushing, just some slight gray, darker shadow color. Okay, and then I'll add a hint of a tongue there. Okay, so now for around the eye, I'm going to add a little bit of my dark. Okay, and then I'm going to do, I think, a green eye. I'm just kind of tapping that around, leaving some white around the edges and the middle. And then I'm going to take kind of dark with Payne's Gray and use that for the pupil. But I'm also going to tap the pupil around because I want to leave a highlight, a little bit of white space in the eye. And then for the other side, just a little dot. I'm going to take a little bit more of my dark, more browny mixture. And a little bit of an eyelid there, a little bit of a shadow under the eye. Now I'm going to take some pink, or this like peachy color, and wash it in to the ears, a bit darker toward the one edge shadow. And then let's add a little bit of a tongue here. So maybe you can see some teeth. Tongue is just going to hint in the middle. Okay. And a little bit of a more pinky color to that, like purple, or more of a shadow. Okay, now for the ground, I'm going to switch back to my big brush and add some green to the ground. Darker right around the horse where there would be shadows. A little bit more of my Prussian blue to cool it down some, and then splatters some very loose yellow around the horse. And make it look like the sun is kind of glowing around. Loosen it up. Okay, lift a little bit around the edges, add some texture. So I use kitchen towels, like hand towels, and this one has texture, so it's kind of fun to use to get some variety there. But then one more time with the shadows. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of that green into the eye just to brighten it up a little bit more. Now to let it dry, all right, I'm going to do just a little bit more work on some of these areas to clean up the shape a little bit. Like here, I wanted it to cut in a little bit more with the blue, that shadow. A little bit more shading in some areas. Okay, I think that's better. Now, she's all done.
Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed it. And just remember that these cards are available for sale on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. Have an awesome day.